So we talked a little bit about Sharebite, your customers. I want to better understand your customers. We know you work with corporations and restaurants. Can you explain a little bit more about how that works? How are you building relationships with restaurants and kind of what sets you apart from the competition?
Yeah. So I'll start with the restaurant side of things, right? Uh, Early on, it was a big challenge for us to go and sign up restaurants because it's like, who are you guys? I don't know you. I've never heard of you. Are you going to send me business, right? And people would take a flyer on us, and we honored sort of whatever that they wanted in exchange for that. But over time, what we realized was that the only thing that matters is the aggregation of demand. And what ShareBite does is we aggregate the most premium type of demand, which is the enterprise, right? And so the type of companies that we service have headcounts, from 20,000 people, right, 20,000 employees, all the way to 20 employees, right? We can service all of them. But the sweet spot is somewhere around. Those are I gave you the full range, but the sweet spot tends to be, you know, um, somewhere in the few hundred employee range, maybe 1,000 employee range. Those are the types of companies that we typically service. So these are category leading companies across every single industry. So if you're looking at financial services, asset management, hedge funds, private equity firms, we literally have all of them, right? And if we don't, they're probably in the pipeline joining us, right? But and that extends across every vertical. So 35 of the Vault 50 law firms exclusively use ShareBite. Every single customer that we have exclusively uses ShareBite to feed their employees, no matter what it is that they want, right? Um, uh, so there's those types of companies, right? So you got professional services, but like there's an entire long tail of other customers that we previously, back in the day, we never really had on our radar. So today we've got professional sports teams that use us. We've got automotive manufacturers. We've got two of the biggest social media companies, that use us, right? We've got public transit companies like NJ Transit. Audible is a customer of ours, and they're very proud of our partnership. And sort of, so if you look at like a cross section of the type of customers that we have, it's literally the who's who of every industry. Um, while I'm proud of that, I don't want to take away from the work that it took, you know, the work that our team put in to go and, be, able to sign up customers like that, or actually demonstrate thought leadership into why you should feed your employees. And it comes down to the pain points, right? So the old school customers that used to previously use Seamless, that's a no brainer. Our tech is better, our product is better, and we do everything, exponentially better. So, and of course the mission, and, we're a transparent mission driven company. So it's also a very feel good story. So those customers were like, okay, we'll give you a shot. And then all of a sudden the entire industry would switch over, because it's all tight knit. They all talk to each other. Nowadays, uh, you know, uh, there have been certain inflection points, particularly around return to the office. And so when these big category leading companies have been very successful at bringing their employees back to the office, they get their peer firms or their competitors or whatnot asking like, how are you so successful? We're literally across the street. We haven't been as successful bringing our employees back. Oh, well, we feed our employees, right? We subsidize their meals, right? In exchange for coming in, or we geofence them for being at the office, right? So it's like, you can only unlock your meal stipend if you're at the office. And so ultimately, like, we've always been a quiet company, relatively quiet company. We have not made a whole lot of noise. Um, you know, we've always kind of had that sort of boring is beautiful kind of mindset. Um,
Right.
Thankfully, the world today loves companies like us, right? Because you know, the zero interest rate sort of environment created all kinds of different incentives for companies that were loud and boisterous. But yeah, we've always been a boring company, and we're kind of very comfortable being that. So we've quietly amassed all of this market share. Um, so uh, particularly, so for corporate customers, it's very clear, right? Some of it is relationship driven, but also they're looking at very specific pain points. So, and those tend to fall in, a few buckets here, right? One is I've got an employee engagement problem, right? I've forced people to come back to the office, and they're all upset, and so we think that a lot of those employees are going to end up leaving for other companies that have more flexible arrangements. How do we make it worth their while? Feed them. Okay. What's the benchmarking? Well, this is what the average company does. Oh, that's not that much. $10 a day? Are you serious? And then it's all of a sudden it's like you know $10 a day, $8 a day. Some companies do much more. If you do a little bit less, but for the most part, $10 a day does the trick, right? And it brings the employee back to the office, gets them, healthy, nutritious meal that they can at least mostly subsidized, um, and, it allows them to also form this community, right? Because if you go to on site at any one of our customers, you'll hear the phrase, "What are you going to share by today?" And that's really cool.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. And so we've got to we take a lot of pride in that stuff, and bringing employees back to the office and getting them fed is also good for the economy. It's good for the ecosystem. It's good for sort of the small businesses that depend on cities and this foot traffic to thrive. So we take a lot of pride in that. The other buckets tend to be more at the C-suite level. You know, um, you know, yes, return to the office is one component, but like we're spending all this money on benefits that nobody ever uses, right? And so, you hear from CFOs all the time, we've got a pet insurance policy, for all employees. I support that, but not everyone's going to have a pet. Not everyone's going to utilize it. Adoption benefits, again, noble cause. Not everyone's going to utilize it, right? So these are the things that companies are sitting there paying for. And when you listen to CHROs or heads of total rewards or benefits, they're like, look, if we have a 7% utilization rate on any benefit, we're all throwing a party. We're high-fiving each other. And I'm sitting there saying, like, let me just share with you that a daily meal stipend has a 93% utilization rate. It literally
Right.
the other benefit that you offer employees to shame, right?
Right.
Everybody eats.
Everyone eats.
Exactly. So, so a lot of companies that have signed up for Sharebite previously never fed their employees, and now that they're doing it, they're never stopping. They're never getting rid of it. So, like, that is so fulfilling to us because, again, even 5 years ago, day done, I've told you, we're going to get every worker in America fed, and we're going to power that. And so, the pandemic and sort of the aftermath of it and the return to the office, conversation has really accelerated our vision. And so it really comes down to, employee engagement, giving employees the benefits that they will actually utilize, right? And companies want to pay for that, right? In the environment where everyone's cutting costs, you talk to CFOs, they're not just cutting costs, right? They want to they're not afraid of making investments. They just don't want to sort of spend money on things that are like not value add for them, right? High ROI
Right.
products. So this is one of those things that as companies hear about this stuff, and then it's a snowball effect, right? Like, who else uses you? And then they see our logo list, and they're just like, oh, why are we not doing that? So today, the conversation with building relationships with corporate clients is the easiest that we've ever had, right? And it will continue to get easier as larger companies continue to adopt this framework.
Yeah. future of work, return to work, and you hear companies that struggle getting their employees back, but when you hear 93% utilization for a benefit versus the inverse of 7% on some of the other benefits, that's a big difference. Sounds like your thesis for you know future of work is feed your employees. That gets them back into the office. That gets collaboration, production. Helps on a broad spectrum of things for companies, right? Challenges they're dealing with. Is that kind of that is that how you would sum it up, or?
Absolutely. So, like, I've given a couple of talks around the future of work, and I don't know that, you know, um, there's more that needs to be said about the future of work because that's the current of work. That's like the now, right?
Right.
The future is happening right now. And look, personally, I support, in office work, right? Because that culture, that collaboration, the serendipitous moments, the random joke on the floor that everyone like, laughs, the birthday party, like things like that. There's this feeling of community, and people get to compartmentalize um, sort of work and then their personal lives. Um, However, that's not for some companies, right? Ourselves included, right? Remote works really well for us. It's really hard to build and propagate your culture on a remote basis. But for companies where that works, we service remote companies too. There are a lot of remote companies that are like, wait, how do I let my employees know that like we care about them, and not in like a transactional manner, on a Zoom, and then and we're able to service them too, right? Like the product works globally, and so when it comes to the future of work, I'm kind of tired about. I'm kind of tired of talking about the future of work. I want to start talking about the future of workers, right? And so my view is that look, the American economy is literally the envy of like every single nation across the globe, right? Developed and developing. But like, I don't think you could say that about the American workers. And that's a sad state. But the average worker in America is really struggling to get by, right? Every little bit helps. Every little bit of goodwill helps. And this is a rounding error on an income statement of any company. Um,
Right.
when we're talking about like $2,000 a year, right? So
Right.
a rounding error for employees. So um, that makes a huge difference. And food insecurity in the workplace is like the invisible epidemic. It's an invisible epidemic. There is a good chance that somebody at your company is food insecure and they will never tell anybody about it because it just doesn't pay. Society's not set up that way, right? Um, and uh, and I know that because early in my career, I also went through that, right? And the only way I was able to make ends meet was, when I worked at, I started my career at Goldman Sachs and grew up at Credit Suisse. First 2 years, nearly 2 years of my career, I didn't know where my next meal was coming from because I had parents to take care of. I had bills to pay, you know, all kinds of things where like every dollar that I was making was like paycheck to paycheck, right? So that came at the sacrifice of like, you know what, I'm not going to have breakfast today, right? Or I'm not going to do this. So I remember, um, when you stayed late at the office, we got a $20, meal allowance, right? And so I would order dinner and I'd eat half of that for dinner and then save the other half for lunch the next day. And so I recently this year, and you know what? For many, many years, I was ashamed of that, right? I never really talked about it, just assumed it was the case. And earlier this year, I did an interview with NASDAQ where I told that story very vocally and openly. And I started getting text messages from, some of my friends that watched it. And these are some of the most successful and well-to-do people that I know, right? Partners at investment banks, partners at private equity firms, CEO of a public company. Like, he's like, hey, that hit home. That hit home. And I'm like, what do you mean? I thought you were, no, man. When I went, when I started my career, like, we were living in a small apartment with like 5 people, right? And all I was doing was working just to kind of make ends meet. So, your employees are fighting a battle that they will never tell anybody about, right? And so, food insecurity, particularly in the workplace, especially if you're working at these companies, any company, right, let alone these prestigious organizations, it's surprising to hear that people are just getting by. You just don't know what's going on in their lives. So,
Oh yeah.
solving that problem, solving food insecurity in the workplace, is gonna be a force multiplier for not only your culture, but really for our economy, right? For our workers and the plight of America's workers. So, especially in an environment like we're going through right now, where it's very difficult, people are very struggling very hard to afford things. Um, I cannot think of a higher calling than to give back to this country and our people at a time that it needs people like us the most.
Dilip, thank you for saying that. That's great. I think a lot of people just don't talk about this stuff, right? And sharing, coming from you, the CEO of the company, that's huge, right? And I'm sure you're able to spread that, message across your company and your customers as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I never shared it with a whole lot of people, right? There's some people at our company, especially early on, because you always ask like why, right? I get the question of like, hey, look, you're trained, you're academically trained engineer, you're a former investment banker, you've got all the Ivy League stamps. Like, why do meal benefits mean anything to you? You could literally go do anything else you want. And it's like, if you're gonna do something and commit your time and your purpose, and really just kind of like to do something like more very deliberate and very purposeful, make sure it's like an outsized ambitious goal, right? And so this is a very, very tall order, even today, right? Like I was just watching a video from 2017 when, because we got the We Work Creator Award, and I was up on stage talking about Sharebite. And I remember going up on stage and saying, like, our mission is to end hunger, first in the workplace, but also at the same time in communities. And so, as you probably know, that mission of, for every transaction that happens on our platform, we donate a meal through Feeding America and City Harvest to help somebody else who defines hunger very, very differently, um, to help feed them. And so in the last year, this is probably a good proxy for our company's growth. In the last 12 months, so last November of 2022, we celebrated a 5 million donation milestone. Okay. Tomorrow, we're going to surpass 8 million. So in the last
wow.
months, we have celebrated 5 million meals, 6 million meals, 7 million meals, and tomorrow, 8 million meals. So
Congratulations.
we're very proud.
That's a amazing achievement.
We're very, very proud of it. Uh, so anyway, you've known Sharebite for a long time, and you've been around sort of the struggles, the shared struggles that this team went through, especially particularly during the pandemic, where we didn't know what the world was going to look like. And there were investors that were at some point called me up and were like, "Hey, this has been a nice run. You should shut down the company." And I was like, "I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a zero salary." And when our management team heard that, they were like, "We'll sacrifice our salaries too, and we're all going to move back into our parents' homes, and then we're going to do this." And so today, the business is like, again, to not to sort of belabor the point. We've not only proven out that thesis, but like I'm very, very excited about where the company is headed. So, as a mission-driven company that genuinely exists to help end hunger first in the workplace, but also in our communities and our neighborhoods, while also supporting our small businesses, um, it's something very, very fulfilling. And that's why we have the team that we have today, right? Like our voluntary attrition is like minimal. And they're all in it for all the right reasons. They're mission driven entrepreneurs who are here, and to get every worker in America fed. So what is good for Sharebite is good for every worker in America. And I'm really excited about that.
Really glad to hear. Thank you, Dilip. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. 8 million meals. Is there, what's the future hold for Sharebite? If you had to end on a, you're mission driven, you talk about your mission, it's great to hear. What's the future look for Sharebite?
Well, I would love to put a few zeros at the end of that 8 million, right? And that's the beauty of this thing, right? Like the more companies that adopt it, the more meals that get donated to people in need, and the more workers that get fed. Um, so yeah, it's a very ambitious goal. It's an ambitious vision. It's always been, and we work with a lot of ambitious people. So like, uh, you know, um, that's what I'm excited about. The pipeline of customers continues to be so robust, and it's very fulfilling to be able to be in this position to close out a year like this, and even last year, and to be in a position of strength the way that we are. And you know, uh, building a company is hard, as you know. You talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. You know, I once heard someone say like, it's like chewing glass, right? You're starting a company is like chewing glass. Um, but working with such smart and talented, ambitious, and mission-driven people uh, help makes that whole journey like so much more worthwhile. So yeah, I don't have much else to say, but very, very excited about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Dilip. Yeah, really appreciate the time today. Totally support the mission. I hope listeners out there will support the mission as well. You
Thank
guys are truly, helping fight the issue with hunger. So uh, if there's any listeners that want to connect separately to Dilip or myself to talk about food tech or learn more about ShareBite, feel free to connect with us directly. But yeah, again, really appreciate the time and thank you for that, Dilip.
Thanks so much, Lonnie. And yeah, you can visit our website and sign up on in the form, and someone will get back to you like within minutes. So thank you, everybody, for listening. And Lonnie, thank you for allowing me to tell the story of ShareBite here.
Absolutely.